My name is Joe Inslee, and today, continuing my series in how to study the Bible, we're going to talk about the book of Psalms. What is the book of Psalms? How do we understand it? Does it apply today? Is it inspired? Find out on today's video. Before we get our shovels out and start digging into what the book of Psalms is and how we study it, I want to point you to my series on Psalms, where I have a whole series and I've preached through several different Psalms using this method here. So if you want to see how I apply what I'm using today, check out my playlist on Psalms. Psalms are the Hebrew hymnal. Hymns are very important for Christians of all ages. Hymns carry us through tough times. Hymns teach us theological truths about God. They reflect what we believe, and we remind ourselves each other of truths and encouragements and prayers in our hymns today when we sing in church. Hymnals have consistently been of high value to followers of Jesus. When you open up the book of Psalms, you have to realize you've just cracked the dust off an ancient hymnal that tells us about some of the earliest followers of God. Many of our Psalms were written by a man who God describes as a man after his own heart. So this is a hymnal. These are things that have meant things to Christians for generations, gotten them through hard times, taught them theological truths, and encouraged them. And we get to look at how Hebrews did it in the past. Psalms are divided into 4 categories. You have Psalms of Lament, Psalms of Thanksgiving, Royal Psalm, and Praise Psalms. The Psalms are also organized in a way that corresponds to Moses' Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. If you're really interested in following along with the Psalms in the Old Testament and the story of creation and the fall and sin, rebellion, and then God's redemptive plan and the foretelling of Christ, I'd urge you to go check out J. Vernon McGee's outline on how the Psalms coordinate with the Old Testament. Many people want to know, are the Psalms just a stressed out guy's thoughts, or are they the inspired Word of God? And the answer is yes. The Psalms are the inspired Word of God. God inspired these Psalms, and then people wrote them. But it's also an outcropping of a relationship with God. So David is inspiredly telling us how he communicates with God, what he feels about God. And what's awesome is in these Psalms, we get to see people who aren't okay. And it's okay to not be okay, and tell God about that. That's the relationship precedent that is set in the Psalms. We also see some imprecatory Psalms. And David is upset and calls on God to do violent action to change the status quo for God's own glory. And we get an insight into what a relationship with God really looks like on the emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical levels. To understand Psalms, you have to first realize that this is poetry. It's a hymn book of poems. So to understand a psalm as poetry, you first have to know, how do we work through a poem? And so I'm just going to give you a couple simple ways to do it. Read the psalm and see what feelings the author conveys to you. How do you feel when you read the psalm? What feelings do you see there? What words does the author tell you about how he feels? Mark those feelings down. Secondly, look at the title of the psalm. Read it first and see what the feelings are, but then go back and look at the title and see if the title starts cluing you in on what the direction the psalm writer is taking this. The title is often followed by the speaker or the writer. Look at the writer of the psalm. Who is the writer? Was it Asaph? Was it David? Was it someone else? Who wrote this psalm, and what were they doing during this time of their life? As you start doing this, you'll start understanding the mood and the tone of the psalm. What are we looking for? This is going to point you back to your 4 categories of psalm. Are we lament, thanksgiving, praise, or a royal psalm? What is the mood and tone that's being set by this psalm? Teachers of poetry have long told their students, paraphrase the poem to yourself to understand it. Writers talk about how meaning is conveyed not only in what the author gives to the audience, but what did the author mean to convey? So it's a participatory project. There's a relationship with you and this psalm for a minute while you try to understand the writer's feelings and then mirror those feelings and see how they make you feel. Paraphrasing the psalm in your own words will help you absorb it better. And then, what is the theme of the psalm? The psalm is going to have an issue, a conflict, or a focus. What does this psalm relate to? Because most psalms are going to relate to a biblical truth, a conflict, or an issue. And finding out what theme they're working with, which is also determined by what type of psalm it is, will help you understand what this psalm is. Psalms are meant to be understood as poetry. Once you've walked through all these steps, you'll do a lot of absorbing of this psalm. And I think you'll get a really good idea of how the writer felt, how you felt, and how it deals with the times. And then the Psalms will start working their way into how you pray with God. And we get to see a great biblical model where we see an example and we follow that example and we grow as a result of it. And if all that is just too complicated to you, Psalm 1 verse 2 tells us exactly how to understand Psalms. We are to meditate on it. And the steps I've outlined previously are just ways to help you meditate and walk through that psalm so that you can understand it. For more notes on biblical meditation, look at a collaboration I did with James Boyd on the art of biblical meditation and how we apply it to our lives.